Who would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Good.
Okay, thanks, Brittany.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
So I think first I'll ask for any public comments for anything that's not on the agenda today.
Don't see any public comment at this time.
Okay. So the first agenda item is discussion and possible action regarding resolution 2022-03, authorizing teleconference meetings pursuant to government code section 54953 in compliance with Assembly Bill 361. That's a mouthful. Move approval, Madam Chair. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
From Dan. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Or do we have to call roll for that? Oh, we do have to call roll. Yes. All
Yes,
right.
let's call roll. Ms. Forrester?
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cromer?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Approved.
Item number 2 is closed session. Are there any public comments before going into closed session?
There's no public comment at this time.
So we will go into closed session. Just let us know when we're ready.
closed session, the board heard two items. The first was the historical benefit review project implementation, and the board gave direction to staff and council. The second item was Janet Lozano. And actually, I'm noting on the agenda that it says service-connected disability, and that actually should have said non-service connected disability and non-work related. And in closed session, the board voted unanimously to grant Ms. Lozano a non-service connected disability retirement.
Thank you. So we will move on to agenda item number 3, the consent agenda. Minutes of the February 9th through 10th special board strategic planning retreat, minutes of the February 16th board meeting, February 2022 retirement report, and the monthly financial report. So any questions or comments, or we're okay with the consent agenda? Any public comment? So we will approve the consent agenda by consent. We will move on to item, no item number 4, so nothing was taken off the consent agenda. And on item number 5, we have no report this morning.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Correct. We'll bring an update on the project status to next month's meeting. I don't have the current numbers for the work that was done last month.
Okay, great. So we will move on then to item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding investment matters. And I will ask first if there's any public comment before we head into the presentation.
There is no public comment. However, Hannah is unable to promote back to panelist.
And Matt.
Yeah,
And Matt hasn't made it back.
Did you see if Matt sent an email?
Yeah, let me find out. I'm sorry, because I have to do all this. I'm not on email.
I know. Hold on a second, everybody.
You know, we might be able to have Hannah join us in one of our offices too. We're actually in the office today.
All right. Some
Yeah.
of us are in the office today too. Not all of us, but some of us.
Yeah, we're getting closer to normal.
You think you'll ever be normal?
I don't know if I ever have been.
Yeah. No, email.
Yes, we're emailing him back right now, so he should be with us shortly.
Okay.
Greg, so Hannah is in attendee mode, and I'm unable to promote her to panelist. So Hannah, I don't know if you want to disconnect and rejoin, try again.
Oh, here she goes.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, now she's there. Yay. We're having a little bit of Zooming issues today.
Understood.
See her.
Should I share my screen? Is that the best way?
Hold on just a second. We're just making sure everybody's where they should be.
Okay.
We had one particular attendee who was specifically interested in the investment discussion, so we're emailing him. So tell me when you think we
Do
should.
we know? No, Nora has the email. Nora has it? Yes.
Do you think we should wait?
We're given so much longer.
Couple minutes.
Just out of curiosity,
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Robert, is there anything that you're gonna report on before we go into the Callan presentation, Robert?
There was not, Doris. Callan and team are set to go.
Okay. You know what we could do is we could talk about how we do manager due diligence first, and then flip back to the investment discussion. Would that
That
make
sounds
sense?
good. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. And I'll share my screen here. Make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. that working for everyone?
Yep, yes.
Okay, great. So we have two things to talk about today. The first is investment performance and exposure to Russia. And then the second topic is something that Robert and Doris thought would be a good idea for us to talk to you about. And that is, how does Callan do manager due diligence? And part of this arises by the fact that you, as the fiduciaries, are responsible for overseeing the assets in the plan, and that includes the performance of the investment managers. Now, naturally, Callan is here to help you do that. We are a non-discretionary advisor to you, and we do this all day long, and this is what we do. We help you come up with strategic asset allocation, we help you pick managers, and we help you monitor managers along the way. So you've delegated a lot of that responsibility to us, and then we report back to you when there's an issue with a manager. Now, every once in a while, it makes a whole lot of sense for you to ask the question, well, Callan, how are you going about doing this responsibility that I've asked you to take on our behalf? The first way that Callan does this is we have a team of people, we call them specialists, who it's their job to monitor investment managers. Now, two people on this investment consulting team to you actually used to be in this group. So for about 10 years, I monitored fixed income managers, and I also, for a while, oversaw our manager research team. And then Hannah previously was part of this manager research team as well. But of all the specialists at Callan, we've got about 64 of them, and it's not an entry-level position for us. It's a senior research position at the firm. To demonstrate that, you'll see that 54 CFA designations, 59 advanced degrees. Half of these people are shareholders of our firm. So it's an important position at our company, and it's their job to make sure they know the investment managers and help our clients implement in the given asset class. Okay, so we've got this team of people behind us, more than just Hannah, Claire, and myself. Now, naturally, Hannah, Claire, and I, we keep an eye on all the investment managers as well. And at the end of the day, we're sitting there alongside of you and coming up with the assessment as to whether we should hire, fire, or move on or resize any investment manager in the program. So here are a bunch of faces associated with those numbers I shared up front. So we have our domestic equity team, our non-US equity team, our fixed income team. And you've met a number of these people over the years. Mark Wood on our domestic equity team, he came and presented to you all about ESG most recently. And I think you've met Ho in the past to talk about international equity managers when we did that international small cap search a few years ago. So Ho was involved in that as well. So
Nathan too, I think. Didn't we meet Nathan?
yeah, Nate Wong on the fixed income side.
Yeah.
So you've met a number of these people over the years. So here's our so we call this the public market manager research team. And we also have private market investment teams. So here we have the real asset team. So they cover both real estate and infrastructure. You've met Jan in the past. Jan talked to you about the infrastructure, and we had Munir come and talk to us about private real estate, the core real estate funds in the past as well. So our average researcher has 10 years at Callan, about 19 years in the industry. So again, we're kind of stressing to you that these are senior people at our organization and important people and a key aspect of our team. Now, you might ask the question, well, okay, that's great. Tell me the last time they met with our fund managers. So we put this table together, and on the left, we have the number of times our research team met specifically with those organizations. And then after Doris and Robert took a look at this, they said, okay, well, can you identify when they met with the investment platform that is responsible for our products, the funds that we're in. So we put that table on the right. And then we have the last time our team met with them on the right as well. So you'll see we've met face to face with all of these people or over Zoom in the current world, over the last year. So this is a real important way we keep on top of the managers. Now, naturally, it's their responsibility to notify us if a material change occurs to the team or the organization, and it's our responsibility to reach out to them and keep communicating to them and make sure we know what's going on with the organizations. Okay, so we're doing this continuously. Yesterday, I was in the office. I met with a firm called Arga. You don't have exposure to them, but that's just an example of just kind of in my day-to-day job, I'll sit down and I'll meet with the asset managers as well, who I have common client exposure with. So this demonstrates the consistency of our monitoring of your investment managers.
Thank you.
Now, what we thought would be a good tool going forward, you have the fiduciary responsibility to keep an eye on these managers. You outsource the monitoring to us. How about we come up with a better tool for Cal and us to communicate to you what we're thinking about these managers? So we don't want to put it on you to be an expert in analyzing T. Rowe Price as an investment manager, right? That's kind of our job. But what we want to come up with is a better, more efficient way to communicate to you what are our thoughts on that organization and that product specifically. So we designed this, we call it a stoplight chart. And we have just a few broad categories here. And it's supposed to give you an overall assessment of what we're thinking about these firms and these products right now. And it's color coded. Green means no issue. Yellow means there's something we're keeping an eye on. And if it turns red, it probably means we're thinking you need to move on. So that's a way that we'll start putting this in our quarterly report to communicate to you. Okay, here's what's been going on. Here's what we're monitoring. Here's our overall assessment of these organizations and the funds. So right now we have a couple firms that are yellow. Fidelity low price stock. To me, this is the one that deserves the most attention. There is a impending retirement of kind of a star portfolio manager there, and we want to take a real close look at this and decide, do we want to stay in this fund or move on and do something else? If we move on and do something else, we kind of want to know what that destination is before we start doing it. So that's the work we're working on right now. Okay, if we did make a change here, where would we go? What would that look like? Because it's one thing to say I'm unhappy with this, but there's another thing to say, well, if I sell here, where am I putting the money? So that's some work that we're doing right now in regards to low price stock. The Prudential Small Cap Value Fund is a fund we've been keeping a close eye on, and I know it's been a headache for Robert from time to time too. This is a pretty deep value strategy that during the run up in growth stocks, it lagged, understandably so. It had some portfolio management changes too. Recent performance is really solid. So it stuck to its knitting. It kept doing what it's supposed to do. And when the market turned, it's come roaring back. So we feel a little bit better about that right now. We also have a couple other things we're noting, performance issues with Oakmark and Mondrian. Again, some of those are very style related. We don't want to penalize a manager for the style they have instead, because we own that. We pick them for that style. But we want to make sure they're doing well relative to other people who have that same style. And then we've got a quick note here about portfolio manager transition in T. Rowe Price, and then part of the Harbor International Fund with Marathon as well. So here's a way for us to communicate. Here's some issues we're keeping an eye on. But to me, the highest priority is Fidelity low price stock right now. Do you all think this would be an effective tool for us to communicate the manager due diligence we're conducting on your behalf?
I think we all understand the green, yellow, and red, so that's good. Yes.
Right.
Greg, the only thing I would add is maybe a key at the bottom that indicates what green, yellow, and red would be.
Yeah. So what we'll say is green, no issue, yellow, monitoring issue, and red would be, key concern. And so we'll add that to the bottom there. That's a great idea, Dan. So that's okay. That's kind of the key stuff we wanted to talk about with manager monitoring. I could bore you with a bunch of stuff about our database and how proud we are of how many funds are in there and that sort of thing, but that may not be the best use of your time right now.
Right. Well, let Judy check to see where we're at with attendees. And
No, he's not back.
well, we will just move on. Yeah.
Greg, one other question. So how would there be a concern about something like an index fund? I thought I saw the Vanguard 500, S&P 500. So why would there be a concern if it's the same 500 companies under one portfolio or another?
Yeah, so we have it all colored green, not surprising. They're doing their fine job of tracking the index. So what could go wrong with an index fund? If they have securities lending in the fund. And that was a huge headache in the global financial crisis. We're going back 13 years ago. But there was a surprising amount of tracking error and capital at risk due to the way other investment managers implemented their index fund strategies. So it does happen. Things can go wrong in an index fund. Vanguard did not have that problem, but other major indexers a little bit behind the scenes. Not every investor was aware of. They should have been aware of it, but there were some other things going on.
Doris has a comment.
I just wanted to point out on page 19 of Callan's presentation is that it gives a nice sort of overview of the different aspects that their due diligence team reviews. And I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So Greg, I think we can move on to the investment report.
Okay, great. And boy, there's no shortage of news right now. And today, Wednesday, is a really kind of historic day in the market. So the Federal Reserve today is expected to increase interest rates by 25 basis points. Announcement comes out shortly, in a couple hours. So that's step one. And I think everyone is expecting 25 basis point increase, but the real question is, what's the language behind it? What are they going to forecast going forward? And there's a very small chance that they increase 50 basis points, which if it were not for the Ukraine issue, that would probably be a higher probability. So that's a big thing going on today. Other big thing going on today is Russia actually has a bunch of debt. And today is when they're supposed to make a debt payment. So are they going to pay foreign holders of their hard dollar debt? And if they do pay them, are they going to pay in dollars, euros, or rubles? So that is yet to be seen. There's a 30-day grace period for them to make a payment. So we may not have resolution to this today, but the money is due today. And to get a little wonky on you, there are things called credit default swaps. And those are insurance contracts on things like bonds. So some people wrote insurance contracts on Russia paying their debt. And there's going to be a big fight as to whether whatever happens is considered a default or not, and whether or not it triggers the credit default swap. And it gets into a lot of legalese. A lot of lawyers are going to get paid a lot of money to figure this out. If Russia ends up paying in rubles, is that a default? But there's going to be a lot of money changing hands, most likely, because most people expect Russia to end up defaulting. Interestingly, before all this happened, Russia was rated BBB, which is an investment grade risk. So it's the same risk as a corporation down the street from you being rated BBB. So that's something that I think in hindsight people are going to look back at that and say, okay, we do all of this ESG stuff, and we still wound up holding this debt that ESG should have flagged as being a bigger risk than it was, right? So that's a big thing happening today. One other quick anecdote is the tentacles of this conflict are very difficult to figure out where they all go. And you may have seen that there was a freeze in the London Mercantile Exchange, and I think it's supposed to start trading today, but nickel has not traded in a futures market for over a week. And it's, who controls 15% of nickel production in the world? It's Russia. And there is a huge short squeeze. Think of GameStop. Remember that GameStop nonsense? Same thing happened in the nickel market. Huge producer in China that is probably out hundreds of millions of dollars because of this short squeeze. They're short the nickel because they produce it and they sell it forward. And then when a short squeeze happens, they need to settle with their creditors who are enacting for them in the futures market. And that's someone like JP Morgan, who I read has $1 billion exposure to this company in China, who's a producer. So could have you predicted that before, that being a possibility of happening, that the nickel market was shut down and that there's this huge counterparty risk between JP Morgan and what was for most people an obscure producer of nickel in China? So point being here is that it's very difficult to anticipate what all the tentacles are of this conflict. And our indirect exposure to Russia is much greater than our direct exposure to Russia. So what I mean by that, if we look in a few pages, the amount of dollars the plan has exposed to Russia as a percent of assets, it's pretty small. We don't have a lot of capital at risk in Russia, but we have a lot of indirect exposure. So this whole weird third, fourth order effect of a nickel short squeeze, counterparty risk, and the fact that the stock market is down 11% on a year-to-date basis, those are all indirect effects of Russia. We have a much greater exposure to that than actually having direct exposure to a company like Gazprom or direct exposure to Russian debt. That exposure is very, very, very limited. I think Jim may have had a question or a comment.
It's just going back a little bit, Greg. I thought I had read something that that a couple of the rating agencies had actually recently downgraded Russia even below the B status.
They did. They are now saying, yeah, Russia's going to default, which is a C rating. I would have to get up to date to. I believe at least one of them has an at C, which says they're imminent to default, and so most people expect them to default if not today, in the coming days. And then the question is, well, who held the debt? Who held the debt? And what happens to all of those people who are expecting payments? It becomes a solvency issue for some people. So there's a little bit, there's a heightened risk in the market right now for sure.
Any other comments or questions on that issue? I can't see all the faces. Oh, Dan, I do see something.
Yeah, Greg, so has anyone made an estimate about how much debt Russia and Russian-based companies have?
Dan, I would have to get back to you on that. I Let me get back to you instead of guessing.
Okay, I'm just just thinking back to I think I went to one of the Callan Institute events a few years ago, and there was, I think, the managing editor or publisher of The Economist, and she was giving a speech about, what might be the things in the near future if there was to be a shock to the economic system. What might it be? This is a few years ago, and I think it was, the North Korean situation was one of the top items that she had on her watch list. Obviously, this is something on everybody's watch list that's happening right now, and I guess I'm curious, is the Russian debt issue just the disruption in the economy? Is this the kind of thing that could cause like an economic downturn on the order of the 2008 real estate collapse?
Well, that's a $30,000 question, and the direct exposure probably not. So a few numbers. Russia on an equity basis is about 1% of the international stock market, 0.5% of the global stock market, 4% of the emerging market equity stock market. So it's very contained from a stock basis. On a debt basis, there's this index out there called the GBIEM, which you don't have exposure to, and it's 7% of that index. So there's that exposure out there, but it's limited. But what happened in the GFC is that there were some people out there that were levered to these things that went to zero. And if you borrow money and what you have goes to zero, you need to get the money from somewhere else to repay that. So then you go out and you have to sell other securities, and that became a cascading cycle. And there is a little bit of that risk out there right now, Dan. To your point, if there's a bank in Eastern Europe who is sitting on a whole lot of Russian debt, and they don't get their capital back, well, that has real implications for that bank and the people who have their deposits at that bank. And that is very difficult to untangle right now. Or if, way back in the day, some of you might remember a book written by Michael Lewis called Liar's Poker. Anyone remember that, Liar's Poker? That was about the failure of long-term capital management. That was a huge hedge fund, 1998, went belly up, had to be bailed out by the Fed and a bunch of the huge regional banks, or huge national banks. And it was a economic, if go back to look at the stock market return, third quarter 1998, and that was all about long-term capital management. And what triggered that was actually Russian defaulting on debt way back then. And they defaulted on the debt for their foreign and for the local debt. And this hedge fund called Long-Term Capital Management was levered to that, and it created this whole cascade of forced selling and liquidation. So that risk is out there, and we've seen it before. I don't know if it's the base case, the most likely, but that risk is certainly out there. So on this, while we're talking about Russia, on this page, what we're showing here, and Hannah did a great job of pulling together all this data, are the handful of funds in which you have exposure to Russia. And this is expressed in percent of assets managed in that fund. So one of your international equity funds, the Euro Pacific Growth Fund at the top line here, at the beginning of the year, it had 0.9% of assets in stocks domiciled in Russia. Okay. As of the end of February, it's 0.03%. Now, naturally, there are two things going on there. Right? first thing is they reduced exposure. The second thing is the market values cratered, right? So both of those things are going on to show you that you have a lower exposure right now. Not surprising, the manager with the greatest exposure is 91. It's an emerging market equity fund. They had 4.8% of their fund exposed to Russia. It's now 0.5%. And it's a little bit of an overweight compared to the index they're meant to track. So you see this index here, the MSCI Emerging Market Index. That's the index they're meant to beat. And they had 3.6%. That index is 3.6% Russia, now down to 1.6% Russia. And 91 was 4.8, down to 0.5. So if you roll it all up for the total plan, it's about 0.25% at the end of the year, and now it's 2 basis points is our best guess right now. There's what's the value of some of these securities right now if they don't trade? That's a little bit of a debate. But also all of these securities have been removed from the indices, major indices, and there are a lot of them are being priced, functionally at 0, but not all. So exposure is limited, but the second, third order effects, we do have that exposure. Stock market, as I mentioned, down year to date about 11%, emerging market down about 15% year to date. And then interestingly, the bond market right now is down almost 6% year to date. That all has to do with increasing interest rates and what the Fed is starting to do starting today. So quick look at assets in the plan, $682 million at the end of February, about $14 million in investment losses. We have performance on the next slides here. The one thing I'd point out, and I bet we talk about it when we meet to talk about full first quarter performance, is the huge dispersion between managers who have a value style and managers who have a growth style. So a value style, I buy things that are cheap and I hold on to them until they recover. Growth style, I buy things that are going to grow quickly and it's going to appreciate due to growth. With increasing interest rates, those companies that are growth companies have been selling off. So let's take a look at this AB fund. Fiscal year to date, so that's June 30 up until the end of February, it's down about 17%. Because they invest in a lot of growth companies there. And we already talked about Prudential already. They're up 5% over this time period. So they're doing their job. Importantly, if you look out over the long run, AB, the small growth, 5-year returns, 10-year returns are still very, very attractive. But we are going through a repricing right now in the growth market. And that same thing applies to your international equity portfolio. So you see Euro-Pacific Growth Fund has had a particularly bad fiscal year to date, down about 14.5%. And then your value manager, Mondrian, Mondrian's been lagging a long time. I mean, they're down about 5%. I mean, we're not excited about that, but they're holding their own with the index when others are underperforming. So they're kind of doing our job doing their job in that time period. The longer term numbers for Europac still look really good, but there's a repricing going on right now. And I don't know if you've been watching the market too closely, but the Chinese stocks of late have been really selling off. Chinese, I think it's a delevering going on to make that nickel margin call that I was talking about earlier. Other thing we'll talk about at the end of the quarter is the bond market. This is shaping up to be the worst quarter of the bond market that we've seen ever. So if we see a negative 6% return in the bond market, that's going to be just about as bad as we've ever seen it as interest rates go up. So in short, real estate's been holding up and infrastructure's been holding up. Really glad we have those investments. Total fund down 1 or 2%, depending on the time period we look at most recently. Long-term returns still look pretty darn good.
Any comments or questions from board members? Well, thank you, Greg, very much for the information today.
Absolutely. It's good to see you all. Hope the rest of the meeting goes well.
Thank you. You too. Bye, Claire, too.
Thank you.
Bye, Claire. Don't see Hannah, but bye.
Bye.
Bye, Hannah.
Thank you, guys. Do we want to take a break before we get into strategic plan, or what is the plan there? Doris?
If the board wishes. This will probably be a kind of a meaty topic, and I expect that it will involve a lot of discussion, so.
Okay. If the board is okay with it, why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back at, if that clock is right, at 5 minutes till 10? That's right.
No, I doubt that. Well, actually, it is correct, so, yeah.
Yeah, my phone says 9:46, so come back at 9:56. I'm gonna take advantage of that. Welcome back. So we are ready for our agenda item number 7, which is presentation of the draft strategic plan. And we welcome Amy. I see you, and there's Catherine too. Sorry, some of us are in the room and some of us are on Zoom, so it's kind of hard to see everybody at once. But welcome, you two. And I will ask before we get started if there are any public comments regarding this item coming up.
No public comments at this time.
Fantastic. Then I think I will turn it over. Do you want to have an introduction?
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're
Cheers.
welcome.
So today is the follow-up to our February 9th and 10th meeting. We're reviewing the first draft of the plan produced by Mosaic Governance Advisors LLC. This has a couple of questions that we had developed at the meeting. Is it a 3 or 5 year plan? Discussion on the mission and vision, but then most of the meat is actually the goals and the proposed objectives and action plan that Amy and Catherine will be going through. So you all received a copy of their presentation, the draft strategic plan and the sample action plan. I hope you had an opportunity to review that before the presentation today, and I'll turn it over to Amy and Catherine.
Well, thank you, Director Rentschler and Madam Chair and members of the board. It's great to see you all today. We had a really nice time in our discussions with you last month. And there's a phrase of working in the business and working on the business. And I think it's always nice when boards can press pause and meet at a different location and work on the business with their staff. And so, in fact, that's what you did. We've been working hard with Director Rentschler since then to come up with a working draft of the strategic plan. And so today, I think we have about 45 minutes. If I have been, I see Director Rentschler nodding. But of course, you can tell us if you want us to fast forward. I know your meeting time is precious. So today, what I thought we'd do, we have a brief presentation. We'll do a bit of a tee up, and then we really want to get into the document and hear your perspectives on what you think. Does it reflect what you had talked about as a group? There's some options for you to consider, as we said we'd bring to you. So I'm trying to think how we best get the presentation up, and maybe it's that I share my screen.
Certainly. Do you want to grant that?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So let's start without further ado. We'll do a brief recap and just talk about what we're hoping to focus the discussion around today. We do have the draft strategic plan. We're going to lay some context for what the sample action plans were intended to do as well. And then we'll talk about next steps. So this is a first reading. This is for information purposes only and discussion. This is not to have action today. So that's an important clarification I wanted to start with. You've seen this timeline before as a board. There are many moving pieces when you do strategic planning. It's really important to gather sentiment from a variety of sources and then bring those together to produce a strategic plan. And so this was the timeline that we showed you when we started this project with the board in the January-February timeframe. At the session last month, I just wanted to do a brief recap of everything that you went through, because you had plentiful discussions and meaningful discussions. And so just as a reminder, you had a visioning exercise that you engaged in. You heard from your consultants, the actuary, your investment consultants, your fiduciary counsel, about what things they were seeing in their respective industries that they thought might have an impact to MCERA, or things that they had been discussing with other clients that they thought perhaps maybe MCERA might want to discuss as well. Your executive director had conducted some stakeholder research with your members and beneficiaries, and on the employer side as well, to get some initial impressions around how they valued MCERA and what specific things those audiences keyed into when they thought about MCERA and the benefits that you offer and services. You also completed a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We asked you to then go back through and prioritize the SWOT analysis, and we worked with that. From the visioning exercise, we created draft vision of success statements that we spent a lot of time with you on day 2 going through. There was some rich feedback that the board provided on that set of issues. And from there, we talked about some of the themes that were percolating up through the SWOT analysis and reflected by the priorities that would represent a potential future direction for the organization. And that's really what we want to capture in the strategic plan, is what new things need to be brought into life or worked on to move the organization forward. So I know that sounds like a lot, and it was. And there were some good discussions. And so we're at the first reading point today, but I also wanted to touch on what we've accomplished since the February offsite. As I mentioned, we've had a number of conversations with Director Rentschler. We synthesized all of the feedback. We brought home all of the papers that you saw on the wall around you when we were at the meeting. We created some sample action plans to demonstrate how the direction in the strategic plan could be realized. And that's important because when you have conversations around strengths and weaknesses and future vision, sometimes you get usually 2 bodies of work that spring up through those discussions. One piece of it is looking at what's the high level direction at kind of the 35,000 foot level. And then you might have other smaller, from the perspective of the level, right? So more at the 10,000 foot level, tasks, to-dos that need to be somehow found a place within your strategic direction. We didn't want to lose any of that body of work. And so we created some sample action plans that reflected some of the very specific things, kind of at the 10,000 foot level, that were brought up through the conversations. And I'm going to turn it over to Catherine in a minute to get us through the document, but hopefully you were able to see all of the things that you discussed or talked about in a meaningful way brought to life through these documents. With that said, I guess let me go through and just kind of focus on what we are hoping to hear from the board today, and perhaps you have some expectations as well. We're really looking to get some specific feedback around the draft itself. As I mentioned, it's in a working draft format right now, so it very much looks like a Word document, a Microsoft Word document, and it is. Once we get feedback, we're going to have it, our graphic designer will lay it out into more of a polished, finished product. So we want to talk today about the vision, the mission, the guiding principles, and some language around the goals and the objectives. And then we also had some general questions as well. Certainly, as we started working through the synthesized information with Director Rentschler, we started to think about where we ended with the board's discussion. And you might recall on day 2, we circled back and talked about the 5-year time period. And there was a general leaning at the time, a general consensus, I would say, that 5 years might be an appropriate time period for the strategic plan, potentially, but that the board itself wanted to see how these various objectives flowed out and flowed through in this documentation. So we'll circle back with you on that today. You did see, hopefully, that we used that 5-year period in a couple of different areas just to give you a feel for how that would look. We also want to talk with you about timing. Is the timing that you saw through the documents, is that consistent with the board's priorities? And then just generally, how close are we, do you think, to being final? And what else might need to be done? So as I mentioned, it's not an action item. This is more of a discussion. We want to hear your perspectives. So with that, unless there's questions about the process or any of the discussions we went through, and Madam Chair, I'll ask and just take a pause. Are there any questions at this point? I don't want to keep moving forward if there are.
I don't see any, at
Okay,
least in the room, and I don't see any hands up on Zoom, so I think we can proceed.
thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, well, that's the nuts and bolts of the process recap. Let me turn it over to you, Catherine, to talk about the draft strategic plan itself.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for continuing to advance the slides for me. So good morning. So this is also just a brief recap, and we'll go into the new material very shortly. So as the strategic plan elements fit together, the vision and mission at the top, the guiding principles support the vision and the mission, and we will talk about the definitions of those in the next slide again as a quick recap, and then the goals and objectives underneath. As you saw from your strategic plan, you have 4 goals, and so we will talk about those very shortly.
Catherine,
Yes.
can you sit closer to your microphone? We can't hear you as well. Yeah.
Okay, is that helpful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like me to go through that again, or are we okay to move forward?
I think we're okay to move forward. You need a piece of tape to tape that mic up there?
I'll hold it. I apologize. I could probably take the mic off, but I'm worried about a background noise. So if this works with your permission, I'll just continue on with this like this.
That's fine. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. Amy, could we advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the mission statement is who we are today. What's our mission? Why do we exist? And the vision statement is the forward-looking, where are we going? What would we like to become? And the guiding principles are really the beliefs that guide the organization, its staff, its board, and its in its day-to-day. The goals, what do we want to achieve? So as Amy said, the strategic plan brings new imperatives to life, and that's what the goals are here intended to do. And the actionable steps are the objectives. So let's move forward to slide 10, please, Amy. The next 2 slides are new to you, and we just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we think about when we think about strategic planning. So on the left is the strategic plan. It sets out the purpose, direction, the desired outcomes for the organization over the next 3 or 5 year period. Your annual board work plan, or in your lexicon, your annual calendar, sets out your objectives as a board as they relate to the strategic plan. So what will you be talking about during your board and committee meetings? If you drop to the coral box below, the executive director's annual action plan, as Amy said, we provided a sample of annual actions. The recipe book, the menu book of things that Director Rentschler will consider doing each year as she moves forward in her annual action plan. And then she will as well assign her staff certain tasks to stay true to the annual actions and move the strategic plan forward. The how well you did this was your self-evaluation, the annual executive director evaluation, as well as the staff performance evaluation. So you have an opportunity each year to self-check. So if we can move forward, please, Amy. Thank you. And so with this frame, let's think about what makes a good strategic plan. And as we go through the discussion, you can keep this in mind and decide whether or not we've hit the mark with this strategic plan or what you'd like to see change. So it's a living document, and it's a foundation. It's a foundational lens through which you look at the annual actions of the executive director and staff. So you oversee your ongoing performance. That's the routine bit. And you also oversee it as it moves the organization, and Sarah, as it moves forward. And that's the strategic part, the evolutionary part of the organization. So good strategic plan has the following characteristics. It reflects your voice as board trustees in the direction that's set out by the plan. It aligns you and Director Rentschler in a shared vision. What is it that's important to the organization to move forward and to evolve? It puts you, the board, in a position to continue to engage with Director Rentschler at the policy level. So it's not a to-do list, but it is very much what are the strategic objectives and goals that we need to accomplish, and you can look at that through that sort of funnel. Is this aligned with our mission and vision? It parses, and in that way, it does parse the strategic from the important. There are things that will come up, and we've all seen this, where they're very important, and then it becomes difficult to prioritize. And in those situations, you fall back to your strategic plan to guide you. It also continues, it's a link to your past and to your future. So it's a continuation of the path you've been on. And as well, it captures as Amy said, the priorities that you discussed during the offsite. So hopefully this is a reasonably ambitious plan. We did take on board, we believe it was Trustee Forster that said that this should be a stretch, but not overly ambitious, and shouldn't be overwhelming to people as they move forward. So hopefully we're at that place. And so with that, we'd like to switch over to the strategic plan document and invite your feedback and discussion at this point. And perhaps we can begin with the mission statement. And we have some options there. We had 4 options, I believe, and we'd like to hear from you. You know, what do you think about the concepts that are reflected in these 4 options? And we'd like to just focus at the concept level and with your permission, work on the words when we leave the call if this doesn't hit the mark. So and we would very much like for you to hear from your colleagues as well, and perhaps coalesce around 1 or 2 of these so that we can narrow this down and finesse it for your next meeting. So with that, does anyone have any comments they'd like to offer? And I will take some notes as you're talking as well. And perhaps, because it's very difficult for me to see here with the screen sharing, how would you like to proceed in terms of taking questions, or Madam Chair?
Well, I can see in the room, but I can't see everybody on screen. So if some of you that are on Zoom have questions and comments, I will. I see now that I see Julie and Dan, but where are you looking? Raised hand at the bottom.
Participants with raised hand, and they'll come up to the top of
Okay.
that window there.
Okay, so we'll just try to switch between the Zoom and the room and see which comments. I might not get them all in the right order, but we'll try. So Trustee Forster, your hand was up first, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, the number 2, the best, and maybe add part of 3 after the professional service to our members. Well, I guess we have to sustain. So item number 2 is my favorite. I think some of the others are either too wordy or not capturing everything that we discuss for our goals.
Thank you. Trustee Dirty?
I think 2 is good, but it seems like just the phrase benefit education might be a little too limiting, because we had some discussion about how the pension is really only one component in someone's retirement. I mean, at a minimum, they're going to have Social Security because the employers are dual enrolled, or the members are dual enrolled in Social Security, and quite probably at least they should consider other retirement options, benefits besides the pension and Social Security, like a 457.
And I think there was some discussion over outreach to our active members too, so we can have them understand their pension and their benefits and what happens over time, sort of do some planning even in our plan going forward. I know we've seen some other counties that pull in their active members and just explain how it's calculated, and it addresses each different bargaining unit. So I feel like benefit education there. I agree with Dan. We did talk about alternative solutions to add on to the retirement, so it's not considered a sole source, especially for our PEPRA members. But I think we were also looking at it just to educate our active employees about their pension.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that 3 pulls in some of those things that you just mentioned, the current members, and it doesn't specifically say education or benefit education.
Chair, if I might, maybe it should be like retirement planning education, which would be much broader than benefit education. But I think education as a whole is intended to include our active membership. We've scaled back on active outreach because of the VCP project, but it is in the queue to restart those pre-retirement seminars and educational offerings to members as we move forward. So maybe changing the phrase to something broader like retirement planning instead of just benefit might address Dan's concern.
Let's see, Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Of the ones presented there, I like number 2 the best as well. Excuse me. And I think as as we go through, as this kind of cascades down from the mission, which we talked about, the value of keeping that fairly simple, is that we'll get into all of those other things as far as the attention to active members and 457 planning and the kind of the elements of the education in as we go through and we get into the goals and the objectives and so forth. So I kind of like the simplicity of number 2 myself.
Personal comment here, and this is to Amy and Catherine. Instead of we provide, wouldn't the mission statement be more to provide or providing as you have in 1 and 3 and 4? The
Yeah.
we kind of threw me off.
Sure, it's your current state and it's what you do now. So we provided some different options and language for you to consider. It doesn't have to be we provide, it can be to provide or providing. All of those speak to your current state. But I do appreciate that. We will just curious what others think about that as well. And just wanted to recap quickly that looks like we're coalescing around item 2. And that's helpful to us, and we can work with the comments we've received. I see, so there's some other comments. Perhaps we can quickly hear those and then move on to the vision.
I heard Jerry say with providing on number 2, and I would add number 4 is too short. So yeah, I think I was between 2 and 3, but I'm fine with 2. And I see Trustee Anderson and Council Berg, and okay, Jim first.
No, I forgot to put my hand down. Sorry.
Are you done? Okay. Jeff.
So I'd like to change to provide instead of we provide. And I have a little bit of reservations about saying we provide sustainable pensions when the plan sponsor plays a role as well, right? So just a little caution there. And to provide sounds better to me.
To provide, or is providing working for you?
Well, that sounds like, I mean, I just don't think we have 100% of the responsibility of providing sustainable pensions. I mean, there's certainly a role that we play, but the plan sponsors also play a role. I don't know if anybody shares that slight hesitation I have.
So you're maybe suggesting a combination between 3 and 2, perhaps.
I think you just suggested changing number 2.
Yes.
To provide.
Yeah. But if the sustainable wasn't there, if it said providing valued pension benefits, that's better than sustainable benefits.
That would increase my comfort level. I'm just thinking, if there was, I don't want to even put it out there, but if there was a claim that, the board wasn't satisfying its fiduciary obligation, and then they, something happens, the market collapses, whatever, and they throw our mission statement back at us and said, your mission is to provide sustainable pensions. You said so yourself. And so anyway, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but maybe 3 would be better, but certainly to say to provide instead of we provide would be better.
Yeah. Okay. Trustee Forrester.
I like the word provide instead of providing or to provide, just straight with provide. And sorry, Jeff, I have to disagree with the sustainable. I feel like that word captures our unfunded liability concern versus valued pension benefits, because valued is, I just feel like that's speaking to, say, something that would be negotiated between the sponsor and employee. not us. And I feel like we were trying to capture that it's unfunded's a concern for us. We'll continue to work towards bringing it down, and so they can count on a future sustainable benefit that they can rely on. So that's my opinion there. I think provide though is my favorite.
Julie, what do you think about the word out of number 1, stable instead of sustainable?
Yeah, that might.
Okay, trustee Cromer.
The thing I personally like about 3 is that it's putting into words that it's a long-term plan, and it's talking about current and future members. And that's the only one of the mission statements that mentions that, we're doing this at, the 50-year plus model. And it's not just in the now. And that's what I personally like about 3 is that it mentions current and future members.
I like that part too. Yep, I like that. We're combining a lot of them here. Yes, trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I think I'm like Julie again. I like, sorry, Jeff, I like the word sustainable. Whether or not we have complete control over things, if the sponsor takes an action, it may cause us to take an action that's under the purview of the board, such as recommending excuse me, different rates and so forth, or changing actuarial assumptions. But I think it is, I mean, our whole purpose is to provide sustainable pensions. So that to me, we talked about kind of rebuilding trust as part of all of this. And that, for me, that's kind of an important word as opposed to leaving it more ambiguous.
Thank you for that. If I could just interject briefly to remind everybody that sustainable was a word that the members in the sentiment survey that Director Rentschler undertook. Sustainability was a word that the members really coalesced around, which is why you saw it used in the various concepts and mission, the vision, and in fact in one of the goals, which we did want to get to talk about as we move forward. So what I'm hearing is that we have some consensus around the elements of items 2 and 3. We've taken some notes. Amy and I will go away and revise these 2 and hopefully bring you something closer that you can say, that's the one. So we're making progress, and with your permission then, Madam Chair, could we move forward?
Yes, I would like to make a comment just to say that either of those are better than our current one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you can thank yourselves for that.
Yes. No, that's
we
good.
listen to you. So if we could advance, please, Amy, to the
I
vision.
see trustee Anderson's hand is up. Is that still up from last time?
No, he forgot to take it down.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
I think I see that. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for that. That feedback's invaluable to us. If we could, yes, the vision. Now here we have 2 options for you, and the floor is yours, please, to discuss and let us know what you think.
Well, I will see what other people think. My first reaction is pillar sounds kind of like, I don't know if I want that word in there, but trustee Forrester.
Yeah, I like item 2. I agree. I don't like the word pillar and just the feeling that it projects. Trusted is, we're in more of a working relationship with our members. I like the second one.
Other comments?
Do we have some consensus around item 2?
Any wordsmithing in item 2 of words that pop out that you don't like? Trusted is in our current vision statement. Of course, financially stable is up there.
I think trusted is important, and maybe is something that we heard in the survey and related to the HBPR project. And we're trying to make sure that we can rebuild faith and trust going forward. So I think that's important.
Well, the rest of number 2 parallels what we were looking at on the mission statement with a little bit of different wording. There's a reliable there instead of sustainable or stable or valued or the other words. Does it make sense to have the same phraseology, if that's a word, in the mission and the vision statement?
Yeah. Let me jump in and take that, Madam Chair, if I could. One thing that we always try to do when we look at vision options is to go to the goals and see what it is, how those goals will move the organization forward, and what would be the result of undertaking those goals. And so we already heard discussion around rebuilding the brand, if you will, and becoming a trusted partner. And so you can see how that flowed through to the vision, so that in the future you can look back and say, yes, that's exactly what we worked on, and hopefully that's what we accomplished. Reliable benefits really was around the notion of improving the operational infrastructure, and getting improved accuracy, documenting business processes. So from the operational side of things, that would then result in reliability, which also includes concepts of accuracy. And we've, Catherine and I have the thesaurus as our friend. So we go through definitions of words and what they mean, and how do we, roll these up together. Expert financial education was really, again, you can see there, it's kind of this cascading of, if you're doing outreach, if you're providing additional education on what topics, what will that result in? And there was a concept in your vision of success around having expertise and being viewed that way. And so that's why we use that word. So similar in terms of what you do today, but moving you along that path of doing it in a different way going forward, being perceived in a different way through the net result of your activities. In professional services, you're going to continue to be professional. You have a professional staff today. There's an infrastructure that supports that. And so, what's the movement there? There is some duplication there, but we weren't sure which of the options in the mission you would land on. So that's kind of the explanation, and I'll press pause on my own voice and turn it back over to the board.
The only other question I would have there, and I look to Quincy, is the current and future. If those wordings were added before members, would that, I liked your idea about focusing on the long term.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Do we want to settle on number 2 to let Amy and Catherine take back to work on the document?
Adding current and future.
Do you want to add current and future?
I'd like to see it.
What do the rest of you think about adding current and future before members? Trustee Anderson.
I don't think that it's a bad idea. I think, all of the members have always been members, whether they're current, retired, inactive, or whatever. Sometimes I wonder if we, in our conversations, the membership loses sight of that because there's so much focus on the retirees. And that's certainly been the case, with the benefit review process. And perhaps it's just a signal that we should be doing a better job of that, because members really does capture everyone.
Good point. Trustee Forrester?
For the vision statement, I think members captures enough, but I think that Quincy's desire to have current and future members could be in our mission if we use number 2 and revise that somehow to include it. But I feel like through this vision section that members is sufficient.
Okay, do we have any consensus around that? You okay with that?
Yeah, I don't care where it goes. I
Okay.
just like to see it.
Okay, I think we can move on. It sounds like we're agreeing on number 2.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So if we look at the guiding principles here, again, these are your beliefs. This guides the board staff in their day-to-day interactions, etc. Coming out of the offsite, we were asked to provide two options. One was a word with a descriptor, and the other was just the sentences, which are provided on the second page. Perhaps at the outset, we can just ask if there is a leaning toward either having option 2, which mirrors what you currently have as guiding principles, or if there's a preference for option 1. If we could just start there and then move into the specifics.
I'm looking for ideas from trustees.
Can you scroll to 2? I'm sorry, I don't have it up on my computer here.
Yeah, so we're just asking about the format. Do you prefer the sentences, or do you prefer the word with the descriptions, or are you indifferent? We're just trying to narrow the format.
Mhm. I like 2, option 2.
I agree, Julie, on option 2, even though it's easy to read option 1 with the highlighted words and then the description. When we're talking about guiding principles, I don't usually think of adjectives, I guess. I'm not an English teacher, but principles to me would be the full sentence.
But you are a professor.
But an accounting professor, yeah, that's different.
Oh, now that I know you're an accountant, I'll be calling you more often.
Former CP, retired.
I personally like to, I think that if we have option 1, most readers or people that look at our website are gonna stop at the main word and skim past the rest. So option 2 is more focused on the true goals that we, and the principles we have, and to get the entire principle, they have to read the sentence.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We'll move forward on that basis. I think we have at least some consensus around option 2.
I don't see any other comments.
Okay. And if we could then follow up with option 2, are there any concepts that are missing here that you would like to see included?
I was wondering, Laura, you guys, the staff, have anything that you are comfortable or uncomfortable with? Yes, no?
Well, my comment goes back to the vision statement, and the educational piece. And so I don't know if you want to go back to that. But
Absolutely.
Was it on the mission or the vision?
vision.
There it is.
Oh, you don't, oh,
To be a trusted retirement partner.
Expert financial education. We might be retirement benefit experts for Mendocino County, but we're not financial experts for the deferred compensation plans or Social Security. And we certainly aren't tax representatives either.
Yes.
So I guess that just adds a little level of discomfort.
It's very broad, you're right, because we're not gonna be an expert in all aspects of financial education.
Right.
Our expertise is limited to what we do.
Nora.
I think that's especially important with the new tax changes coming up, that we separate those two out.
So expert retirement education?
That might work.
We narrow it down to retirement.
So if I can just remind everyone, this is where you were hoping to go in the future. It's certainly not where you are today.
To be. Do you want to
And-
be expert
We don't want anything to do
financial?
with taxes.
Yeah, and part of the discussion was about the possibilities of broadening out the types of education you can provide. And that would be driven in part by the surveys and sentiments you would be collecting when you go through your outreach to members. And so to a large extent, since you'll be crafting the questions, you're in the driver's seat here about defining what that looks like. And so just want you to think about that and not go very broadly to all aspects of financial education. It is what you will define it to be. And so I just wanted to offer that here. There were some
Well,
comments from people on this, on the
Okay,
attending virtually.
thank you. You just said another word, outreach.
Oh,
Because I'm just thinking instead of expert financial education, could be reliable benefits, outreach and education for our members and professional services or something to that effect. But trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I think at the offsite, we talked about this quite a bit, and we discussed that we'd want to be a resource, that we're not going to be Social Security experts or 457 experts, but the office would be kind of like able to help folks access those resources. So, if there's a way of potentially having it communicate that.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Journey.
Yeah, I think Jim got it just right. Maybe instead of expert financial education, is resource for retirement financial planning or something like that. I mean, we are the ones that have the best ability of anybody to reach the members and reach them with information that's provided by Social Security experts, provided by 457 experts, and point out to the members that this is information you should learn.
That's good. Okay, appreciate it. And Jerry, thank you for reminding me to look for staff hands too. So trustee Cromer.
I think I'm seeing things on the same page as Dan on his last comment, that it's not necessarily that we have those experts, but we do have the experts come in and give us the education. We've all experienced that on our regular meetings, and we're sort of the conduit for that to our members. Doesn't mean it necessarily has to come from one of our employees, but the people we've hired to do our financial investments and other presentations to us. So that's the way I was looking at that part of the vision statement, not necessarily it has to be an in-house resource, which I am very trustworthy of the advice and information we get from our employees, but we have financial experts that give presentations to us, and our members can watch that at any time. So I do believe they are experts of the people that present that information to us.
And this is a 10-year vision too.
Right.
So, Catherine and Amy, can you pull all our ideas together?
Yes, we're capturing everything. So thank you for that input. We will make some revisions. If we're fine there, we can come back to option 2 on the guiding principles to capture any missing concepts. Before we do that, I just wanted to do a quick time check because we're nearing the 45-minute mark. And Madam Chair, are we okay to continue on?
We are. This is the important item for our agenda today. We need to get through this. So yes, we don't want to rush some of these important decisions. There are some things on our agenda that we may postpone until next month so that we can spend our time finishing this today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So if we could just discuss what concepts might be missing that you would like to see included in your guiding principles, that would be very helpful to Amy and I.
I like that you've captured, the long term, and you've captured the empathy, the impact to individual members. I think that's important, and of course, how we do the work. Anybody have comments or things that have been left out?
My only question is, the second to your concern about outreach, whether that belongs under guiding principles or whether it's back up. I would like to see it someplace.
If I could offer this concept of outreach, it's an action item. It's not a strategic item. It's an action. It's how you would conduct your work to get yourself to a position of providing the financial planning that your members would like to see. And you will see that captured in the objectives and the action plan, if that's helpful. If you all feel that it's a strategic imperative, it certainly can be brought forward.
Good to know. I just would like to see it someplace.
We
And
hear you.
as we advance into the sample action plan and you see how their objectives tie to the goals and then their proposed examples of what actions staff takes to support those objectives might help clarify that for you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Any other comments or questions? I will say on option one, you do have that last highlighted sustainable word. I'm wondering if that fits into the third bullet on option two in any way. It's not
Okay.
just focusing on long-term, it's focusing on sustainable long-term. I'm not sure of the wording. That word was important to us in our.
Yes, we can, thank you. We can put that in there. Okay.
Anything else?
I would just add that the use of the word sustainable in that definition, I like it, because I think it clarifies what it means and also suggests what it doesn't. So I'm very comfortable, by the way, just for whatever it's worth, with that definition of sustainable.
So even the sentence that comes after that word sustainable, to me, is a little bit clearer than the sentence in the third bullet of option two.
Well, we can just swap out that sentence for the sentence in option two, if you like that sentence better, but we can drop the leading bolded word, and just go with statement.
Okay.
I'm gonna let our experts look at that. And
Yeah, thank you.
Figure it out.
Thank you.
We will definitely work on that and make sure that we don't lose any of the concepts, but that we capture sustainability.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. All right. Well, if it's okay, then we can move forward to the goals, the discussion around the goals.
Yes. Okay.
We do have one question, a specific question, and we'll just move past all of this. The other thing I just wanted to point out was a previous comment by Director Rentler, and perhaps this is something we can just touch on briefly at the end, but our goal is to keep this discussion at the strategic level and not drop into the actions. But we can help to frame how this all fits together, how the moving pieces fit together. And we would flip back to one of the slides in our presentation, I believe it was slide number 10, to show you how everything fits together again. There are lots of moving parts, but they do all knit together into various plans for all levels within the organization. But we really just wanted to get your input at the strategic and policy level so that we could make sure this document is reflective of all of your voices. And certainly the annual action plan can be amended and should be amended as you move forward. So on goal one, and Director Rentler did bring up that this concept of sustainability could need some definition, and we did discuss that this was something that your members had voiced a preference for. We'd really like to hear your input here on the language around goal one specifically and what your thoughts are.
I personally think it's clear with health, and I think it's clear if you take health out and put sustainability in. I don't have an issue with that. Other reaction?
I think I would say keep health and leave out sustainability so we're not overkilling with the word sustainable in this entire document. I think health captures it all.
When I read it, I thought stability could be used in the place of health or sustainability there too. I know it's a synonym, but that's what in my mind read was stability.
Anybody else? Do we have any agreement over health or stability? Can we leave off sustainability?
How does the board feel about the goals that have been pulled from your analysis?
Preserve the plan's long, yeah. Well, preserve or, yeah. Make it We're on our way, but
I
that's
already
our,
know four of them. So
Oh,
those will be
oh.
the goals that we'll be working on over the next 5 years.
right. No, we were asked to look at one. I hadn't got to the rest yet, but,
We will work with either health or stability and see what makes, I guess, some good sense in taking into consideration the discussions that were had as well. Either work really well, I think, and
They do.
appreciate the comment about not overusing the term sustainability. So thank you.
okay.
Yeah, that's terrific. Are there any other comments on all of the goals? Do they capture at a high level your future direction?
I like them all as they are.
I really like 4. We talk about the risk assessments all the time. And,
Yep,
And I really like 4.
yeah. Me too. I'd put it higher, but that's,
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. Should goal 4 be moved up? Do you like the order? I appreciate that comment, so thank you. What are people's thoughts on that?
I would rather see it up as goal number 2, right after long-term financial health.
I could agree with that.
Although the goals aren't really ranked. You're not saying that it's necessarily less important, but we certainly can change the order of them. But these are all of the primary goals that this plan would focus on as far as efforts over the coming 5 years, probably.
Yeah, Director Rentschler is correct there. Certainly amongst all of us in the room, these are all equally important. It's about managing the perceptions externally that don't have the benefit of understanding how to interpret this. And so I think there is perhaps a signal that this document can be used to convey.
Forrester?
I like it as goal 2. I think it reads better, and then make 2, 4. Just swap them, because speaking of long-term financial health, then strengthen the risk oversight, and then improving effectiveness of people, and then MSARA's reputation and retirement expert just sort of flows better through the logic of the goals.
Thank you. I am stuck on, I agree with what you've said, Julie and Jerry as well. I'm stuck on the preserve on goal number 1. I mean, I'm thinking about improving or strengthening or something. Preserve sounds like we've already fixed all our problems.
Yeah. That's
So is there another
Oh,
word?
Provide. I know we had that earlier on in our, was it in our mission?
Provide 4.
Provide 4? Yeah, I don't know.
I think just sorry to interject. This is a future goal, right? So you're right, preserve links it to the past. So provide is also sort of a continuity. This is what we're providing right now. We'll look for a future type word.
Somebody suggested ensure here.
Ensure, yeah.
But you guys are the word people. Can you find something there that doesn't copy something else? Okay.
Yes, yes, we can, and we'll take a note of that. That goal number 1. We will find another word to. I like the concept, and Amy and I probably did have strengthen at one point or another, and then said, "Oh, it works better with risk oversight. Let's move to something else." So we will find something else there.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Or find something else for strength and risk oversight. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, we will make sure that we take on board your feedback here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see. Yep, sorry. No, I don't see any other comments on the goals.
I just want to check in.
They are good.
Thank you. Amy, I just want to check in with you as I don't see you out there. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you though, Catherine. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Good discussion.
And in light of the time, then, Amy, do you think we should just go through each of the goals now with the objectives, get some input?
Yes, I would ask, and I know we're we're running short on time. There's a lot here to talk about. And so I would appreciate hearing from the board, the objectives. Hopefully they felt familiar to you based on what was identified in the SWOT analysis. And, but I'd love to hear any thoughts or comments, maybe across all of the goals, on any of the objectives or the concepts around the measures and targets. And hopefully you saw how that all clicked together when we set it up in the document here.
I did as well. I think the key on the objectives is what comes after that, the work plan. So, the objectives are kind of broad, and I don't quite know what they all are saying, but then when I look at the sample work plan, it makes a lot of sense. So, let me look around then. Anybody on Zoom that wants to make some comments on the objectives?
Yeah, on any of the objectives, and we can scroll through them if you don't have them in front of you.
I can't hear you. You need to lift your microphone.
Oh, I just said if you have comments on any of the objectives under all of the goals. I realized we were sitting on goal 1, and that causes people to want to look through. So I just asked if we could scroll through in case people didn't have all of them on the screen, and they could have a quick read of them and just provide any feedback.
Well, because this is, I'm going to ask the board, because this is an important document for us to complete in the manner we want it completed. Do you want to take the time to go through each of the goals and at least the objectives there? And I see Trustee Anderson. Let me take your comment while people think about my question.
Thank you. I was just going to say, as I was reviewing these for the meeting, is that as I went through the goals, I thought they captured our offsite meeting very well. When I got to your descriptions of what would this look like, I thought those descriptions really, I just really hit the nail on the head. I thought the language in all of those were more clear than the actual goal itself. So I don't know if that's helpful or that could provide any direction if the other board members agree or not. But those resonated with me more than the actual goal language.
And those measures will be in the written strategic plan, correct? So
yes, everything you see in this document. Sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm just commenting and supporting what Jim said as far as if we have all of that in the plan, the document, it does make more sense when you read it all together. I agree with that, Jim.
Well,
yeah, everything you see here is what will be in your final strategic plan document with
what
your
she's saying
feedback.
And what Jim was talking about was what will success for goal 1 look like, and it has those 3 bullet items listed there. We're at the bottom of page 9. That is part of the plan. It will be in your final document. If you're expecting something different or in addition to that, then you would need to, tell us more about what you were looking for.
Can I offer, and for Trustee Anderson, would it help if we moved up the language about what the success would look like to further define and crystallize what the goal is, and then move the objectives underneath? Is that something that would help?
And other trustees as well.
Absolutely, yes.
From from just the construction of the document, I'm not, you guys are the experts there. I'm not 100% certain, but I think if the two were more closely wedded together, you kind of have like, this is the goal, this is what it looks like if you're successful. I think that is a more powerful statement than reading one and then kind of finding the rest cascading down from there.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. That's what I heard in your comment, and I think that would help shape understanding. And then you could move on to some of these steps below as to what what you would need to do to get there. Okay,
I like that.
okay.
But Jim, you
Thank
can
you.
put your hand down now.
Thank you for that feedback.
So how about the specifics? Do you want to look at the specific objectives under each goal? Or you've reviewed them and you're okay moving forward, trustees?
Well, I think it is important that we touch on the goals, whether it's in this meeting or whether we get together again, like offline. You know, does the board want to explore private credit and private equity investment opportunities? That was a topic that had certainly come up during the SWOT analysis. And because it received a number of votes, it's included here as an objective measure. But again, some of this will tie back to our asset allocation process and recommendations from our investment council on what they think an appropriate asset allocation is. But we can certainly provide additional educational measures if the board wants. So does the board want to explore that? Does the board want to consider developing a position on ESG? We've had a couple of educational items on this, and the board chose not to give any direction at our February meeting on an ESG position. We can bring it back as part of the regular review of the investment policy statement and the belief statement, or is it something the board wants to handle, earlier than that, outside of that routine process or something? So, are those objectives the board supports? And for each one of those goals, are you happy with the objectives listed? Those objectives will eventually translate into actions to support them. So it is important that, for me, that you are happy with the objectives stated.
If I can, and Director Rentschler is absolutely correct. If I can offer that these did come up through your voting process with the SWOT. So we've gone through the exercise of the prioritization. It might not be an A, B, or C, but these certainly floated to the top. And I often have to remind clients that not deciding to not have a position is making a decision. So giving direction to not move forward is still making a decision. And so perhaps building off of what Director Rentschler said around objective B for ESG, you may decide to not make it to not have a position. And that is something, though, that did receive a number of votes. And so it requires some further action, whether that is making, again, the decision to not move forward.
Trustee Harris.
I'm trying to remember exactly when it was we went through a detailed examination of private equity, and the board decided, I know this is for the future, but the board decided that since our portfolio was already high risk, that adding private equity, which tends to be higher risk, to it wasn't going to give us the kind of breadth we were after. But without Greg being here.
I want to say it was 2019 when the last asset liability study was done, and we will be queuing up an asset liability study in the first part of the next fiscal year, the last quarter of this calendar year. Although I've heard that our consultant is not really recommending any additional new asset classes or doesn't expect to, but if the board wants to look at it again, we can certainly look at it again. But it was 2019.
Okay, yeah, I
Well,
appreciate that. I didn't remember, but for me, it wasn't that long ago. And I know we're talking about what we want to do in the future. So many weren't here, so I thought I'd at least bring it up.
For me, for objective A, it just is so specific. I could see exploring alternative investment opportunities, including private equity and private credit or something. These three objectives, I'm not sure if those are going to result in the 5 characteristics of what success will look like. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. But there's probably other, and now I'm probably getting into action items versus objectives, so.
And personally, I actually have an issue with, what does success look like? Item number 4, the long-term investment performance exceeds the assumed rate of return. Well, our entire goal with setting our investment allocation is to achieve the assumed rate of return over the long term and not to exceed it. So I do actually have issues with the language of what that metric looks like, because that is not what we set out to do with our investment allocation.
You know, we're trying to assume the right rate.
We can certainly remove that. I think you have some implied, that some of the return imperatives are implied throughout the other success statements. So we can take that one out if it's, and we take your point on, Director Rentschler, and appreciate that. And I actually liked the suggested language under Objective A as well, exploring alternative investment opportunities.
That broadens
narrows
it.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does broaden it a bit, and we were taking forward what we heard at the offsite and trying to make this as tight and specific as possible. But we can certainly explore alternative investment opportunities, including private equity and private credit, if that makes everyone more comfortable.
I think so, but let's see what Director Forrester and Dirty have to say. So Julie first.
Regarding the long-term investment exceeds the actual rate of return, can we say meets? And so it can still be included, but that's part of our stability of the plan is, being able to project and meet that and work towards that in all of our decisions. So rather than eliminate it, if we just said meets instead of exceeds.
Yeah, I'm fine with saying achieves or meets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do
Trustee
that.
Jurdy.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with putting in the plan that we're going to explore private equity. I don't remember us saying we were going to. I mean, I'm pretty skeptical of private equities because they get kind of the benefit of locking your money away while they want the money, and yet when our plan needs funds to pay benefits, we have to sell off our public equities, which may or may not be good timing for the public equity sales. So it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. And anyway, I don't want to really use the word private equity or private investments.
And this does go back to the SWOT analysis where people put the dots next to topics that they thought were important. And so with that, private equity, private credit showed up on the list under opportunities, and it received a large number of dots or votes. And so these items that are showing up in the objectives are really being pulled directly from the voting that you did via the dot process at last month's meeting. And those that received a lot of dots are corresponding to work as far as objectives to support the specific goals of the organization. And Amy and Catherine, please correct me if I'm wrong in any of that.
No, you're correct, Director Rentschler. And in fact, but this is your document, and so we are certainly happy to pull the language back if that makes the board more comfortable. And you can reflect which steps you'd like to take as you move forward to the actions. But this doesn't, making the language exploring alternative investment opportunities does not preclude you from moving forward with private equity or credit should you choose to explore that as well. But it doesn't commit you. And I think perhaps that's what Trustee Gerda was talking about.
I'll just note that we've outperformed CalPERS and they have private equity investments. We do not. We have public equity investments.
Yeah.
Right.
Well. So.
But I think part of what was under consideration here is that the past is not predicate to the future. So we who knows what's going to happen, and you heard from your investment consultant. But I think your point is absolutely well taken. That shouldn't be committed here, and so we can pull that back if that makes this a more palatable objective.
for
And
me, when I look at those objectives, they all look like they relate to the process the board actually does every 3 years right now, which is the asset liability study and the selection of their risk tolerance and the asset allocation of the portfolio. So to me, I can see how these things do serve to create long-term financial health of the plan, because it's part of the process that we have, which is reviewing our actuarial assumptions, reviewing our asset liability study, and our asset allocation. And these are just subcomponents of that process in my view.
so does that mean then another objective would be something like reviewing the target rate? I mean,
Well, and Julie has her hand up too.
oh, I'm sorry.
The objectives are, in my understanding, and again, Amy and Catherine can jump in here, supposed to tie to the opportunities or threats and how you want to approach those that came up through the discussion at last month's meeting. So these, again, are tying back to those items that people put on their SWOT analysis, saying they saw opportunity here, or they considered this a risk that we should look at to see how we can mitigate it. I'm not saying that these objectives shouldn't be included in the plan. I'm just saying how I see they all relate to a process that we actually have. So I'll yield the floor to Julie, and then perhaps Mosaic could comment.
I was just wondering if we can change it to say explore alternative or additional investment opportunities, so we're not specifically calling out private credit or private.
Yes, that, we have agreed for that.
And remove it from the measure component for private equity and private credit. It's there as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll just, I'm just gonna ask Amy if she'd like to add anything at this point.
Thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to offer, I guess, a comment around what would you need to look for your strategic plan for in terms of supporting. And we really want to focus on specific new things that need to be either discussed or considered, maybe not committed to, but discussed or considered, what needs to be brought into life to move the organization forward. Right. And so when we were looking at the SWOT analysis and talking about opportunities and talking about threats, we had some conversations on your business operating formula, if you will, the benefits plus investments, or benefits plus contributions. And my goodness, I baffled that, didn't I? Sorry.
Contributions and
Investments plus contributions equals
C plus I equals
Yep.
B minus. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So with all of that said, again, as we're focused on working on the business, what are the things that would need to be brought into life that you haven't discussed yet or might need to discuss? That could be very well part of a process or a routine that you already have as a board, like your asset liability process, for example. But here, what was coming out through the SWOT analysis was this focus on alternative opportunities, right? And so we felt a need to capture that in the SWOT that we brought back with us. It was pretty specific that there could be a discussion in the future, private equity, private credit. But again, we're happy to broaden that. We just want to make sure that this is capturing those new things that are going to help you move forward. Whether you decide to do them or not is totally your choice, but we're trying to capture a direction here and make sure that it's going to be helpful for you in looking at things that you may not have currently. So that's why I wanted to offer.
And I appreciate that
Explore.
comment.
I'm sorry, Kathy.
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate being reminded that these all came from the docs we put on the papers at the retreat, because we did talk about all these things, and I do remember that. But I don't want to go through necessarily changing what we're doing now after we went through that work at the retreat. But I think in that one particular instance, we don't want to limit it just to private equity and private credit. It needs to be a broader. The other ones maybe don't need to be, but that one jumps out. So Trustee Forrester.
What about explore investment opportunities such as private equity and private credit, or explore alternative investment opportunities such as?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And then they're specifically listed from our work that we've done, but it doesn't sound as if we've agreed to it already.
Right, right.
Yeah, thank you. We will definitely change the wording on that objective A.
Objective C is very broad too. I'm not quite sure what it means, but as Jim said, it helps to then read down what successful looks like. So.
And we'll put that up. So that
I feel like we've kind of beat goal 1 to death.
Yes.
If we could move on.
Yeah.
There's that word again. Which one? Sustainable. Where's sustainable?
Oh, success for goal 1. Sorry, to go on to the next one.
Okay. Okay, there are several objectives here on goal 2. So I don't know, Catherine, if you have any initial comments, or you just want the trustees to comment on these objectives?
Yeah, this will be your new goal 4. That's just wanted to bring that back. Yes, really appreciated that feedback. And no, I don't have anything further here. Just wanted to get any feedback for Amy and I around concepts that we're missing, words that you don't like specifically. We are getting into wordsmithing a bit, but we appreciate that because I think that will help to make this a better document when we come back. So
I would like to make one comment on this one. The original draft, objective C about assessing the current usage of our education, communication, and services had a really objectives D, E, F, G as sub bullets to it. I asked them to break those out separately because to me, those are very large items that will all be addressed independently, but they're really, in a way, all contingent upon doing item C first. So the first read of this, there were only 3 primary objectives, but item C had so many sub bullets points that I asked them to kind of break that out. So D, E, F, G are all really things that are contingent upon what comes out of the process of doing objective C.
Could objective C then be shortened?
Well, objective C is the entire process of analyzing our communications and our education and services and how our membership, all groups choose to interact with us and how they want to receive that, and then setting up some baselines and then being able to determine, what our metrics should be for moving forward in those arenas as far as communication and educational offerings, etc. Again, I do see why they had those objectives D through G as subcomponents of objective C, because you really have to wait for some of C to be done before you can move forward with those others. But for the way I was, viewing it in my own mind about how things have to align and be broken down and be done, to me, they made sense to list them separately, but I just wanted to bring the fact that D through G are sort of dependent upon completing C to the board's attention.
I understand that, and I agree with that. I'm just wondering if C could stop after services.
Well,
whether we have to say why we're doing it.
I would defer to Amy or Catherine as far as whether or not we need to say sort of why we're doing it, or certainly it could be in the measurement of that we.
Anyway, I will look for other comments it just kind of jumps out being so long, and the other ones don't have the reasons why.
It does actually, and thank you for that. We had that element of C under each of D, E, and F. And as Director Rentler said, she pulled that piece of it out. It's quite action oriented, but since it helped with how she viewed the actions that she had to take going forward, we thought it made sense for us. It was fine for us, and so we can definitely end it at services. You're right; it is quite long, and one would say, well, growing strategic relationships is really long. It is really important too. Shouldn't that get more space on the page? And so let's chop it down to, I like the idea ending at services, and that's great. Does anyone have any other feedback for us?
I think those are easier to understand and clearer than goal 1 was for me, but it's just the way it turned out. Anybody on goal 2? Can we move on then to goal 3?
Thank you.
And 3 is still 3.
Yes. So this goal was really around the business processes and technology improvements that you discussed at the offsite. Are there any concepts here that you feel are missing, or anything you'd like to see added or changed?
Again, no particular order, right?
Correct. And you can see that objective D occurs before objective C as far as maybe a potential timeline to address those in. So these are not ranked as far as a priority. They were just a listing of things that related to that goal.
Right. Because objective D is very important.
Well, you will see underneath the target dates do assign, I guess, not a priority of importance, but a temporal priority. And so there is a little bit of a priority spectrum set out in under each objective for all of them. That was one of our questions for you, if you felt comfortable with the timeline. It was and that particular, and Director Rentler would have a lot of insight into that, since this will filter into her annual work plan. But
right. So trustees, make sure you read what success goal 3 looks like, number 1. We're all highly qualified and engaged and inclusive and admired and well respected. And attuned. Did I miss that?
I didn't catch it.
If I can, objective C under goal 3, I wasn't a part of the meeting, and I apologize. I had primary work functions interrupt my plans to be there. I'm not sure, without being there, that I understand what that objective means.
I can address that one. It stems from a discussion about our reliance on the county or potential independence from the county. And I think this objective is to just, review what our reliance on the county is and determine if that is still the best source of those services, or if it would make sense to look at other sources for some of those county supported services.
I understood it better when I read the measurement functions, but the evaluate sourcing decisions is where I got confused in that objective. I understand it now that you said that.
I think they were trying to be graceful and not talk about independence or reliance on the county in the objective, because they didn't want to create any animosity. But I could be wrong about that. But really, it's just looking at where we get our services, and we do rely on the county for a number of them, especially IT related and HR related, and ensuring that it's meeting the needs that we have as an organization as far as getting those services through the county.
Do you, see a way to word it that is clearer to you, Quincy?
With what she said, I think just deleting a few of the words in the middle, so develop and implement a process to evaluate Sarah's core business operations periodically. That's clear to me. And then the measurements, I think, completely explain the rest of what that would entail. But that's my personal opinion.
I think it is hard to read the way it is.
So we can strike those couple of words in the middle. I think it's understood that
Right, that some of it's sourced.
that even if it's our custodial bank or our pension administration system, that we're looking at sourcing decisions on all of those types of things. So I think we can tweak on that one. And I thought Jim had his hand up, but now it went away.
Oh, he
But
needs it
somebody
up
up
now and then.
Back up.
Okay, trustee Anderson.
I think you had it covered that, and I'm hating to wordsmith here in the interest of being efficient, but it kind of violates our jargon rule. I think the sourcing decisions is confusing, and I would agree. I would just be more straightforward with the language there as to what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. So are we coalescing around develop and implement a process to evaluate Sarah's core business operations periodically? That's still a little bit wordy, but we can try to trim that down a little bit more to make it tighter.
I think the evaluate sourcing decisions were the words that were confusing it. So I think you're good there.
Okay.
On the wordiness, also, I just had a question on objective D as whether we need to the extent possible. I mean, everything's to the extent possible.
Yeah, I think that was just to acknowledge that we don't have control over some of it. Certainly as far as the board, we don't necessarily have control over who runs in an election.
Sure.
Or even sometimes who the board of supervisors may appoint. But again, we acknowledge and understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be phrased. But I believe that's what it was alluding to.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah, Director Rentler. I don't know why I keep wanting to call you Dr. Rentler. I do for some reason. Director Rentler is correct there. It's to signal that you're not trying to supplant the processes in place for bringing trustees to the board, but simply working within the structure that you currently have.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, you mentioned when the board appoints somebody, the supervisors or whatever, we need to give him the terminology that they must appoint highly qualified, engaged, admired, respected, inclusive.
And y'all are welcome to make recommendations and try to encourage people to apply if you think they would be a good addition to the board.
That's right.
Yeah,
I didn't see Dan up there to get that.
Okay.
I think we're okay on both three.
Good.
And Jim, we
Wonderful.
saw your hand go up and down again, so I don't know what's going on there. But.
No, I think they probably have enough information, but as I recall the discussion, it was all about, who the service providers were going to be, and that Sarah, was looking to have more autonomy in deciding who was going to be the best service provider, whether or not it was the county, if that was feasible, and to just somehow capture that in plain language.
Thank you.
thank you.
Headed to goal 4, which is now goal 2.
Yeah.
Making great progress here. Thank you for the additional time.
Absolutely. So I'll open it to trustees and staff to make any comments on the 2 objectives.
So if I may, Chair, comment on objective D, evaluate how the board spends its time fulfilling its responsibilities. One item the board may not be aware of is that I maintain what I call a rolling calendar that tracks the board meetings and what topics need to occur during certain board sessions. And Mosaic brought forth the idea that we can look at the timing of actions under the different objectives that will be undertaken. And those that need to go to the board can be built into that rolling calendar. That calendar sort of becomes your board work plan in a way. I'm not sure I have the concept completely nailed down there, so I'll refer to Mosaic, Amy and Catherine on that. But the first one is sort of, as Quincy mentioned, the risk assessments to our operations, our audit functions, our cybersecurity. But the second one was bringing all of the whole of the strategic plan and bringing that through to how it relates into your board. I'm going to call it my rolling calendar as far as when items come back to you for review and action and follow-up. I would foresee that we would have, again, a quarterly update about specific things that are going on, but that use of the calendar was trying to tie these into your agenda so you know how you're spending your time on routine matters and strategic matters. And with that comment, I'll turn it over to Mosaic for any additional comment on that.
Thank you. Amy, would you like to step in here, or would you like me to continue? I'll pass the floor to you.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Catherine. And Director Rentschler, I think you captured it well. Having a calendar where, as trustees, you all participate in understanding or in discussing what are the routine items that typically find their way on your agendas, what are the strategic items, and they link directly to this document, and how will you make sufficient time to discuss those over the prospective or the coming year. That's a practice that we support greatly. We think it builds good governance, and it also gives all trustees an opportunity to understand the agenda development and agenda construction process. And so that's why it's used with other boards, regardless of sector. So that's what we were getting to here, was that concept of the board work plan or a board annual calendar.
And I will comment that I have worked with systems like that in the past, and it provides the advantage of not doing a strategic plan and putting it on a shelf. That you use the strategic plan on a monthly basis with the board meeting. So I do appreciate that.
I've not really used the calendar to that full extent, and I'm not sure how, if I'm implementing it in the way it would be expected or fully. So if you have an example, I would love to see it. So I have a way to crystallize what I can do on that calendar concept, and then we can bring that back to the board.
I will look at that. It comes from my past.
It doesn't matter how old it is.
Yes, right.
Thank you.
I think, Director Rentschler, one of the things you could use as your guide is the targeted timeline. So for example, if we look at objective A, these are occurring in fiscal year 2024, there's an element of routine risk monitoring and reporting, but this is really about how you're looking at risks from an organizational perspective. Can you improve the reporting? These things would come onto the calendar to be discussed and sampled during the course of that year. And then you're back to the routine aspect of that particular item. And so as we look at as well, objective B, for example, if you decide that you're wanting to undertake the exercise of having a skills matrix, which we see some public pension boards have, and look at where the gaps are, that would be something you discuss in more detail in the upcoming fiscal year. And that would be on your calendar at different points in time, not related to the updates that you would have on a quarterly basis vis-a-vis the strategic plan. That update that you would get on a quarterly basis is really the update from the executive director as to how the implementation is going. But where the implementation of some of the strategic priorities that are tasked to the staff to undertake, but where there's more input required from the board, that's where you would adjust the annual rolling calendar and make time in the calendar for those items, either at the committee or at the board level, if that's helpful.
I appreciate that. So you mentioned the timelines underneath the objectives, and I know you want to have a final discussion about the 3 versus 5 years, but it was hard for me to analyze what I thought about the different target fiscal years at the bottom of each one, simply because everything I read, I say, we need to do it now. We need to do it now. So it's hard to spread it all out. So I didn't put a whole lot of effort into reviewing those. I don't know if anybody else did.
This is my way of viewing it because
Gotcha.
that's one very long list. You have to keep going back and find dates or whatever.
This
So
is good
this
to
puts
share
it out in a chart for me. And so I have the goal with the 3 objectives, and then even I detailed it further with some of the specific actions that are in the next document that was attached. And then I laid it all out to indicate, does this happen in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, et cetera.
And is that something you'd be willing to share with the board?
Sure.
Okay.
And this is like this, just the year 1 selection.
Okay.
So that I can say, okay, these were the things that were prioritized to occur in year 1 based on that document that you reviewed today.
Right.
I'm happy to send that out to the board. It is a work in progress, and it's based on the draft status, so some of these items will change. But you can see how I've organized it so I can see how I need to plan out for the 5 years, but now I also know what I need to get more detailed on for the first, year or 2. So then I took items and built them back into my rolling calendar as far as when I thought there was a topic that actually had to go to the board for either discussion or action, to move something forward. Did you see?
No, it came from Catherine, I think.
Sorry.
I apologize, Director Rentler. Yes, so we part of what we did since the offsite is work through the timelines, and Director Rentler provided us with her assessment of the time it would take to when she thought it would be appropriate to schedule some of these items. And Amy and I did take some liberties and push some of the timelines back a little bit because we thought there was a lot going into each of the annual work plans. And given that you still have your project ongoing, so we pushed a few of those back. So Madam Chair, that's on us because they are all important, but there's a limited scope of resources that you have to work with. And we wanted to make sure that the dates were reasonable and attainable as well. So I think that perhaps that's getting a little granular. Maybe if we flew up to the higher level, whether you think a 5-year cycle is appropriate, still appropriate in light of having gone through each of the objectives now. There is a lot in the strategic plan. And are you comfortable with the 5-year period?
Well, look at the other trustees. I will say I definitely am.
What I could do, if it would help the trustees, is send out sort of the 1-page summary that just lists the goals and the objectives, and it has years 1 through 5. And you can mark perhaps where you think it should fall, and then we can say, well, the trustees are really thinking that this one specific item is more important to handle now, and that these other items I had marked as year 1 maybe could wait. We could take into the board's feedback on some of those dates if you want, or you could just at least have an understanding on where some of those fall across the spectrum of a 5-year plan. Now, this would change significantly if you tried to put it into a 3-year time frame.
And I'm not suggesting, I don't know if any of the other trustees are, but I'm not suggesting that we redo any of the years that you put down.
You're a policy person.
Yeah.
Not an operations person.
Right,
And,
no.
and I do appreciate the fact that the folks at Mosaic went ahead and changed a few things around. They did move 1 item up, but they pushed several out to further on, because year 1 wound up extremely heavy with, like half of all of the things that needed to be done, trying to accomplish in the first year. And I realized that it was also probably not truly realistic. It's just that everything does seem important, because obviously we said it's important. So they balanced it out a little bit, and then some of these will continue to be fleshed out over the next couple of years as we identify operational things that will go in support of particular objectives.
But I think
Right.
my comment was just that it's true of all strategic plans I've worked on. It's true of my to-do list that I make at home. Everything I want done, gets written down, and I can't get it all done at once, so.
Right. We're all guilty as charged. I
So
just
any
wanted to
trust-
offer.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Could
go ahead.
Sorry, could I make one comment here? Just because it says fiscal year 2025, it doesn't mean you can't start it earlier. That's the date that you're targeting to complete it by. You can certainly initiate discussion sooner, but we're just moving the target completion dates to make it just a bit more manageable. Based on our experience of having undertaken these types of plans and planning in the past. You're certainly welcome to move them, and we will look to Director Rentschler to further fine-tune the target dates before we bring the final plan forward next month.
And that's important to note. Those are target completion dates, but it might be that the work plan to actually achieve that is broken out over a number of steps and spread out over 2 years to get to the final conclusion.
Right. Good. So I'm back to the question, and I see Jim has his hand up. I'm back to the question of 3 and 5 years. So Trustee Anderson?
Thank you. I would agree with the 5 years, and I was just curious from the discussion if our consultants were at all concerned about being successful on the number of the goals, or any specific goal that we may be at higher risk of not being successful on those.
Risk assessment for Amy and Catherine to answer.
Well, why don't I begin, and Amy, you can certainly please pipe up. Well, that I think was how the lens we were, thank you, first of all, Trustee Anderson, for that question. And that was the lens we took when we reviewed the initial timelines that Director Rentschler had set. And that's why we pushed some of them back. And as she noted, we did bring one forward. In time, we were concerned about the ability to achieve everything in a tighter timeline. And it became more apparent as we went through the exercise of thinking about this, that 3 years was far too ambitious, and that 5 years was much more reasonable and manageable, because you have so many things, items that are routine just to keep operations going. And these are really the new aspects and elements that we wanted to bring forward. And with that, let me pass it over to Amy to see if she's anything further to add, please.
Thank you, Catherine. I just wanted to add a quick example of what Catherine means. Goal 2, and I'm sorry if I'm giving anyone whiplash of the eyeball here as I'm scrolling back through the document, but when we have experience with branding exercises, and sometimes those can take 6 to 12 months, as I know many of you are aware. And so we just wanted to be cautious that when you have the project going as described in Objective A, that we're realistic when new things can come on. We know branding and all of that that it entails would result in updates to your communications, updates to the tools that you would see in Objectives C, D, E, and F here. And so that's why you see the expanded timeframes there. And we talked with Director Rentschler about that. But we did think that, for example, Objective G, growing stakeholder relationships, we brought that forward because we thought that's something that can be done all the time. And you can start right away without necessarily having to have the other ingredients that were specified earlier. So just wanted to offer that as an example.
Thank you. Director Forrester, Trustee Forrester.
I just wanted to check with you, Chair Smith, on time. I'm sorry, I'm in dire need of a bio break, and I wasn't sure if we could resume after lunch, or I'll just step out for a minute. It looks like we have a big agenda, so I just wanted to do a time check-in here on what we're doing.
I want to check with Director Rentschler, but just my thinking out loud is that we do not need to spend time, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the sample action plans. I think those were just for our information benefit, and yes. So if we've all looked at those, there are some items on the agenda that we can postpone till next month. So maybe we finish.
You don't want to
quickly.
resume after lunch?
I don't really want to resume after lunch. It's
Okay.
still a quarter till. I think we can be done in 20 minutes. But if we need to take a break, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we might be at a natural breaking point here with the strategic plan discussion if everyone agrees. I think we've captured what we needed, what Amy and I need to work on this. And so we are happy to bring this discussion to a conclusion. If Madam Chair, you're happy and your colleagues on the board are also happy to do so.
I think we accomplished quite a bit, and I'm comfortable with moving forward and looking forward to the next draft or the final, hopefully, draft of this. And we really appreciate both Amy and Catherine, all that you have done to help us get to this point. Any trustees have any comments that would prevent us from closing this topic? Thank you too very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back to you with a next draft next month. And we'll continue to work with Director Rentschler. Amy?
Thank you. Just wanted to thank the board and you, Madam Chair, for all the guidance, support, and enthusiastic participation in this process. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Did you
Thank
have
you,
something,
Amy.
Judy? No. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
So how about a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and I really, I think we will postpone items 8 and 9 and 12, if that's okay with Director Rentschler.
Yes, I believe that would be fine. Item 12 was just a proposed timeline, but again, it's all contingent upon whether or not Ms. Forrester has to vacate her position as seat 2, I think, but we don't have that information yet, so it can certainly wait.
And I will add that 8 and 9 were from our subcommittee or ad hoc committee. And sorry, Jim, I didn't talk to you about this ahead of time, Jim and Richard and I. And those items can wait until next time, especially if we're going to use the strategic plan idea for some of the revisions. Okay, Jim? To wait until next time? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so let's take a quick break and we'll come back for items 10, 11, 13, and 14. Okay? All right, 5 minutes. on to item number 10. And discussion possible action, it's another resolution defining compensation earnable pursuant to government code for members who are not subject to another government code, non-PEPRA members. I could read it all like that.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Chair Smith. The county is in the process of developing some new pay codes, in part just to facilitate their ease of reporting. This new pay code they requested was pay code 103, which is for regular time. Specifically, it will be used for elected officials, and that's specifically, not pacifically, sorry about that. And then also, so this is considered a pensionable pay as regular pay for both PEPRA and legacy members. And then they're also making some changes. They added a new pay code 205 to replace use of 200 for extra help. The board has typically not considered the pensionability of codes that are being set up for extra help positions because by virtue of being extra help, they are not participating members of MSERA. But it is solely the board's purview to decide whether or not a pay is pensionable or not. So I really put this on here with the intention of asking, does the board want to know when those codes come forward? We can bring back a cleanup resolution to show you all the other codes that the county set up and did not submit for board approval. Because really, the approval of whether or not it is subject to pension includable in pensionable comp or compensation earnable rests solely with this board, and the county probably shouldn't be making that determination outside of involving the board. But they said, you know, it's because these people are not in a participating class. So does the fact that they're not in a participating class of employment allow you to say we don't really want to look at those codes? But I don't know if council has an opinion on that.
I'll look to Jeff.
I don't really have a strong opinion. I mean, I guess if you put a transparency lens on, maybe it's good to include, but I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
And what does the board wish to see in the future?
We could bring back at some point a cleanup just to include all of the pay codes that have are in use at the county, but are not pensionable because of by virtue that they're used for extra help. If the board's interested in just seeing that, having a comprehensive list.
I don't know what I'd do with it, but.
Well, we do, I believe, post it on our website, so our employees and our members are also aware of whether or not a particular pay item is pensionable or not.
Trustee Forrester.
Yeah, thank you. What Doris just said, basically the list is provided online and the members can look, and the employees are sort of familiar with those codes, and it allows them a reference what is included and not, for them to just a checkpoint for them to go online and access. So I like the cleanup and bringing it back.
Okay, so we'll bring back a cleanup at some point in the future. It may not be next month, but you know, whenever we get around to it. But as these codes are developed in the future, we'll include them each time the county advances one. So this resolution we're asking you for to adopt as presented is for our general legacy members, and pay code 103 for elected officials would be pensionable.
And Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I was going to say, after with all the talk about education and clarity of retirement planning with our members and so forth, I think that erring on the side of bringing them to us would be a good idea.
Okay. Okay, we need a motion for this resolution.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
In fact, are we going to try to do them all together and we should do this with everyone else or not?
I would like you to approve this one today because it does include the new pensionable code for elected officials. For all the historical codes, we'll bring back a separate resolution to update those once we get that information compiled.
Okay, then, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we adopt resolution 2022-04 as presented.
Second.
Okay, Julie seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please, Judy.
Okay, Ms. Forrester?
Wait, is there another comment?
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
Just a question for Jeff. It doesn't look to me like there is a change for elected. They've just changed the term. They just changed it to regular pay elected. I don't know that there's a change there, but if there is a change, should I be abstaining?
They used to put your pay, or for those elected officials on code 100, which is the same code that all the rest of us use. They've split out a new pay code for reporting purposes and their new payroll system. So the pay code for elected officials will be 103, but it is just your standard regular time. So in a way, it's a new number, but the board had already made a decision that regular time, of course, is includable in compensation for pension purposes. This is to essentially acknowledge that and put it on the list.
I think your comment may be because elected is struck through on our draft. Is that why you asked, Dan?
It did not exist before. When it first got added to this document, we put in 103 elected regular pay. I wanted to change the verbiage so it became 103 regular pay elected. But it doesn't matter which way we phrase it, but it is a brand new code that had not been in use before.
Okay. The net effect is I don't think there's any change. I think it's just a change in terms, but.
Code 103 did not exist before.
But what is pensionable, as I'm assuming is the same. There's not a practical change, even if there's a new pay code.
That's correct, but the board has to adopt them based on pay codes that the employer uses.
Okay, so my question to Jeff is, even though there's no practical effect, should I abstain or what should I do?
So I was looking for the easy answer, which was abstain, but how many trustees are in the room there? Would that only leave us with 4?
There's 3 of us here. So we would have 5 if James voting.
Then in an abundance of caution, why don't you abstain?
Okay, I'll abstain.
Okay. Roll call.
Ms.
Oh,
Forrester?
Quincy, I forgot about Quincy, sorry. Sorry,
Yeah,
Quincy, I
Quincy's
forgot
here.
about you.
We do have a
And
quorum.
he's wearing a suit.
All right. Ms. Forrester, do you agree?
Yes.
And Mr. Journey's abstained. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cromer?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item number 11, resolution 2022-05 for PEPRA members, same code issue.
Same issue, just for our PEPRA membership.
Any questions, conversation? Any public comment? So I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt resolution 2022-05 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2022-05. Any further discussion? So we will go with a roll call vote.
All right. Ms. Forrester?
Yes.
Mr. Journey?
Abstain.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cromer?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you. Approved.
Thank you. So we will move on to agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action regarding fiscal year 2023 budget.
This is just a request to see if there are any board requested inclusions or changes. Last year's adopted budget is provided for your reference so you can see where the spending levels were. There was a comment at some point last year that more solicitation from the board was desired. So this, because we do not have a separate budget committee, I just am asking the board if there's anything that they would like to see added or changed or amended to the budget that we will be bringing back in probably May for review and potential adoption for next fiscal year.
My initial comments were just the personnel line and the board travel line with more conferences requiring in-person travel. So just
We can make sure we have adequate allocations for those.
they're on there. They're done. They're not new. It's just maybe new money. So. Other trustees have items for the budget that may not be on last year's budget? No donuts for meetings or anything?
We ought to start doing that.
Then let us move on to item 14, the administrative report. And I'll ask first if there's any public comments on the administrative report. Do we not have any public attendees? Okay, all right. So Director Rensselaer.
Thank you, Chair Smith. It is my pleasure to announce to the board that we have filled our 2 vacancies. For those of you who may not have heard, Judy Zeller has been promoted from Retirement Specialist 3 to the Retirement Analyst position, and we have hired 2 new retirement specialists. You may have seen Kayla in the meeting here during the strategic plan discussion. Kayla is one of our new retirement specialists. The next one is starting next pay period, and her name is Lynette Pater. So we're very happy to welcome both Kayla and Lynette and to congratulate Judy on her promotion. There is a legislative update attached to the administrative report, so please take a look at the Sacker's legislative update. And then there's just a couple of reminders about the $9 payment for your fiduciary waiver of recourse and your Form 700 filing. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the administrative report or topics.
Well, I want to congratulate Judy officially. You've done a big help. I mean, you've been a big help for this board and my support to getting oriented to what needs to be done and everything. So thank you. And I will say, I asked Judy ahead of time about transitioning out of this particular piece of her job. And she said she will be training someone else to take over in the future. So we will see her on and off, right? Julie.
I just wanted to say congratulations too to Judy and thank you for staying on and being willing to continue the work you do. I've worked with Judy a few times and she's always been kind and patient and clear and concise in her communication. And I'm really happy that she's able to move up. And we discussed in our strategic planning the continuity of people. So this goes along with that. And I'm just really happy and thank you for your continued service.
Thank you, Julie.
And Jim.
I just wanted to add my congratulations as well to Judy. I remember coming to work for Sarah, and Judy was, of course, the first person I met when I walked through the door, and I think she's been an amazing ambassador for Sarah and has just does an excellent job, and we're just really lucky to have her.
How many years of this Sarah having?
Almost 15 years.
It's time.
Yeah. You brave soul. Yeah. Very good.
Thank you all.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. So item number 15, any general board member items? Okay, I see none. So if there is no further business, I think we can just announce the next board meeting is Wednesday, April 20th. And I guess we don't need a motion. So the meeting is adjourned.
Nice job, the power.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
See you, everybody.
by noon.
Bye.
Bye. Jim, oh, he left.
Have a